Today's video is sponsored by War Thunder. Stick around to learn more about the game. Star Wars Outlaws. Okay, when this game first got revealed, it didn't blow me away, and I think the main reason for that is I'm just simply not a Star Wars fan. I'm a casual enjoyer. I grew up with the prequel movies, I played Battlefront 2 on PS2 with my friends, and I enjoyed the Star Wars Jedi games when they actually worked. All this to say, I didn't play Outlaws from a fan's perspective. I just wanted to play a solid, good, open-world video game. And after about 20 hours with the game, I would say it lands very firmly in the good, not great camp. Which, by the way, feels like something you could say about every single Ubisoft game that's come out in the last decade. But I'm not going to sit here and act like 7 out of 10 is the worst outcome, because it could have been a lot worse. Star Wars Outlaws is still a fun game. It can be very exciting in small bursts. Where it runs into trouble is when you really start putting the hours in and getting towards the end of the content, where it feels like things are just repetitive and you've been doing the same thing over and over again. But by this point, you know what to expect when you see Ubisoft open world. It is a formula that's tried and true that we've been seeing, like I said, for over a decade. Nonetheless, let's dive in and talk about it. Before we jump in, thanks to Ubisoft for sending a code so I could review this game and share it with you guys. I think by far the most interesting talking point around Star Wars Outlaws is its approach to open world game design. Because to me, it feels like they've taken their open world formula and sort of constricted it a little bit, reined it in, where in previous games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it felt a little unruly. The maps felt way too big and bloated, and there was a lot of unnecessary, smaller side content that didn't really add much to the experience except to pad the runtime of the game. By contrast, Outlaws is not that big. I think it's actually appropriately sized for an open world video game where you're not spending tons of time getting from point A to point B. There is some interesting stuff in between the content that you can encounter. They also made traveling between point A and point B more interesting in this game, and it didn't quite click with me until I got a couple of upgrades for it, but the speeder is really fun. Once I unlocked the boost and the jump, I was having a blast. I turned Tatooine into like this motocross, arena where I was just going off massive jumps and having a good time. You can also glide across water once you've got the upgrade for it on Akiva, which just unlocked another part of this map and sparked that, intrinsic motivation for me to go and explore. Of course, it helps so much that this is a visually stunning video game. It is gorgeous. I mean, the vistas, all of the planets are on 24-hour, day-night cycles. The weather effects are impressive. It's very rainy on Akiva, and you can see that reflected on Kay's hair. It's sort of matted down when she's there, versus somewhere like Kijimi, where it's really cold and the snowflakes are kind of in her hair. Even the interiors were impressive. Sometimes when a game like this is pretty on the outside, you go inside and it's very dull. Not the case with this game. I mean, you go inside, the cantinas, the environmental design is just, it's dense. There's a lot of detail if you slow down and look at it. The Imperial bases are immaculate and reflective, just like you would expect. Some of my favorite moments in this game were actually just walking through and soaking in vibes, and that's not what I usually do in video games, but I couldn't help but do it in this one. I mean, look at this clip of Kay walking through Mos Eisley.
I can't get used to how bright this planet is.
This game just passes a certain vibe check where it's fun to exist in the world. It's fun to hop on your speeder. It's fun to explore. It's fun to walk around in cities. It's very strange, but it's there. It's undeniable. But I think what's really at odds with those feelings is the gameplay and kind of everything else that goes along with this game, which is just very, 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 very shallow. The combat and stealth were two big sticking points for me, where I felt like I saw everything this game had to offer after the first couple of camps. The first couple of encounters, Kay has her blaster. It has a couple of different modes, but that's your only weapon. I don't really understand their decision for this, because there are many different weapons you can pick up off the ground, but they're used as, I would say, like Halo power weapons, where you pick them up, they have one clip, you can only use it until the clip is out. And also, Kay wants to throw these down constantly. Anytime you interact with any object, it unequips automatically. So the game is almost like wrestling these weapons out of your hands and saying, no, 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 use the blaster. That's the primary weapon. And it just feels at odds with this being an open world game. Like, it's very restrictive. This video is sponsored by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. and it's available now for free on PC and consoles. War Thunder immerses you in the center of massive battles, surrounded by detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and the authentic sounds of war. You get to choose from 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships, starting with the fighter jets of modern day going all the way back to the biplanes of the 20s. Every vehicle is painstakingly detailed and modeled down to its individual parts. Plus, all types of armor, shells, and missiles behave just like they would in real life. X-ray view gives you a precise look at exactly where the shells penetrated, what got hit, and how the vehicle was destroyed. More than 70 million players to date have played in War Thunder's epic PvP battles, thanks to its massive content library perfect for fans of military history. Personally, I love how War Thunder has a mode for every type of player. Arcade mode enhances vehicle performance and simplifies the physics, my favorite. Realistic takes it a step further, balancing intensity and authenticity. But if you want the real ultimate challenge, simulator mode has you covered. War Thunder pushes it further with in-depth customization, offering era-specific camos and markings for every vehicle, even ones created by the community. Now is the perfect time to jump in. Play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox using my link in the pinned comment or description. New and returning players who haven't played in 6 months will also get a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including premium vehicles, the Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. This bonus is available for a limited time, so grab it quickly. I don't know about you guys, but in open world games, I want to be able to make more decisions, more creative options, and this game a lot of the time kind of just swats away your options and says, no, you're gonna do this. Now, unfortunately, I felt the same way about stealth in this game. There are plenty of missions where the game says, hey, you need to not be detected, you cannot trigger an alarm, or else you fail and you're booted back to your save. Usually I am very down for 1 or 2 of those missions in a game where it's very high stakes and says, look, if you blow this, you blow this. So I'm on board, but this keeps happening over and over and over throughout the course of the game. Again, it just feels at odds with the type of game that we've got here. This is an open world game. You should be able to approach situations in multiple different ways, not force down one single funnel. And when the game does force you to do stealth, there's just not enough going on with stealth. You can use nicks to distract enemies and move past them. You've got sort of a stun move with your blaster that will knock enemies out from range. This game just doesn't give you enough tools to facilitate interesting stealth, but it forces you into stealth a lot of the time. In my opinion, just too much. And hey, that'll not be a problem for some people. Some people will say, I play Far Cry or I play Assassin's Creed only in stealth the entire time, and that's fair. That's fine. That is, you know, an option. But for this game, it's like the only option for a lot of them, and it just didn't work for me. Another thing I praised in my preview for this game, but just didn't pan out for me, was the syndicate and the reputation system. I really wanted to like this. I thought this would be a front and center mechanic for the main story of the game, and that just goes to show when you go and play 4 hours of a game, I mean, that is really first impressions. You are not able to gauge how that's going to affect the rest of the game. That's something I try to explain when I do my preview videos, but it really rang true here because the syndicate missions almost feel like a separate mechanic in this game entirely. There are 4 different criminal syndicates that you can side with or go against in the game. You've got the Hutts, Ashiga, Pike, and Crimson Dawn. But the catch is you're only making interesting decisions during side missions for the most part. There are a handful of main missions where you get to choose a side between the syndicates, but then that is like barely reflected in the main story whatsoever. So again, it just feels kind of siloed off to the side, sort of a thing you can do if you want to. And I guess after the preview, I just expected a lot more from this system. I thought this was going to be front and center and woven into the story. This is not a game where your choices actually matter, is what I will say. It turned out to be, unfortunately, a surface level thing where, look, if you are a Star Wars fan and just interacting with these crime syndicates, that might be enough for you. But for me, I was expecting this to have more impact on the story. The main thing that it does impact is the gameplay. And like I said before, the gameplay just isn't interesting enough for me to want to side with a syndicate. If you choose the Pikes, for example, and level their reputation all the way up to, you know, great, perfect, they love you, they will give you some exclusive pieces of gear that you can't find in the game otherwise. That's fine, that's great, but if I don't find the gameplay all that engaging, I don't really care about getting a jacket that, you know, increases my power blaster capacity by 2 shots. I also expected the access that you get to certain areas on the map or in cities to matter more based on your criminal syndicate standing, and it really doesn't. I think I experienced that in a couple of missions, but by and large, you know, it doesn't matter your standing with the Hutts as you're playing through this game. Just don't go into Outlaws expecting the criminal syndicates and the network to be at the core of what you're worried about or what affects things in the story, because it just doesn't. All right, let's switch over back to something that I did like about this game, something positive, and that was the story. Now, it was disappointing that the syndicates were not more involved in the main plot for me, but what they did deliver with the story I thought was interesting. There's some fairly interesting twists and turns and betrayals that I didn't see coming, and some emotional threads, some things that Kay has to deal with and work through, and some relationships that struck a chord with me because I deal with very similar things, in fact. So I think the main cast of characters, Kay and Nyx, if you can call Nyx a character, and ND5, those 2 to 3 are very, very interesting. And then the extended roster of, you know, heist members that you recruit throughout your journey are also pretty interesting. It falls a little bit flat after that. The experts that you meet, for example, it's very brief, and some of them, my goodness, the facial animation in this game. I've seen clips on social media that sort of feel like they're cherry picking the worst things, but it's undeniable some of these things look bad. And for Ubisoft, it's just weird. It's a problem of consistency. It's that facial animations, they can look great in heavily mocapped scenes, but there's, number one, not enough of them, and then number two, they can look absolutely dead and awful the very next scene. And I don't know what that is, like an allocation of resources where they feel that, you know, they're going to invest in the best scenes, but leave the rest of them up to automated systems that just aren't good enough. I'm not sure what they're thinking, but it absolutely brings down some of the tertiary characters where you look at these faces and you're like, okay, that could have been better. I'm not sure why they didn't put more attention on that. As I was noticing this, it actually reminded me of Ghost of Tsushima and what Sucker Punch decided to do with their faces. They essentially said, look, we don't have the best faces for an open world video game, so we're gonna kind of hide them. We're gonna do these more cinematic scenes where the camera pans out and you're not gonna be focused right on their faces. Star Wars will put the camera front and center in front of the character and hit record even though it knows this NPC doesn't have good facial animation. It's just a bit strange. For some people, that's going to be a nitpick that doesn't matter. For me, it does matter. I mean, I think that these tertiary characters, when this world is so pretty and the environmental design is so dense, and then you see a really dead face, it's jarring. So ultimately for me, this game is good, not great, because it's pretty and it's fun to move around in on the speeder, and the story was interesting enough that it hooked me and I wanted to see it through to the end, and it felt legitimately satisfying to finish. But the everything else in between felt like a confusing decision or left me a little bit disappointed. I think it's a game that's a little bit at odds with itself. It feels more linearly designed, but set in an open world, and that makes the open world feel a little flat. Sometimes it feels more like I'm walking through a gallery that's very pretty, but the second I try to interact with the gallery and reach out and touch anything, the game is like, no, don't do that. You're not supposed to do that. We want you to play this in a very specific way and experience it in our way. And also, I think a big critical part of kind of the reaction in the reviews to this game is that that's a specific kind of game that does appeal to people, certainly. And I think you could see that reflected in the review scores. For me, there should have been more going on. If they were going to specifically only give you the blaster and only let you do stealth a lot of the time, those mechanics needed to be rock solid. If they were going to rely on the main story and not give you a bunch of choice or the illusion of choice, the facial animation needed to be better than what we have here. I'm sure it's very expensive to do motion capture for all of your main cutscenes, but I mean, this game isn't that long, so I'm sort of confused why they weren't able to stretch that and, really blow us away with some faces. And they just didn't. And I think that's because of the scope of the game. It's still a big game while also trying to be this linear focused game. So it's just a little bit of a confusing package for me. It's a game I found myself enjoying enough of the time for me to say, yeah, I had a good time. Thanks to War Thunder again for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play for free now on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox using my link in the pinned comment and description. New and returning players who haven't played in 6 months will also get a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator. This bonus is available for a limited time, so don't miss it. So that is it for me, guys. Thanks again to Ubisoft for providing a key so I could play this game and share this video with you guys. If you enjoyed, hit that like button. Also subscribe for more videos like this and ring the bell so you don't miss my next one. Thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you next time.